Orisa Conversations. Right. Hello. And yes, Ifa Bemio, Fahima, B. Or I have to get it. So
Thank you
welcome.
for having me. Thank you for having me, sir.
So welcome to all listeners, all my supporters. Welcome and join the discussions. So today, I just want to touch on people misconception of Ifa's how because a lot of people when they believe I speak of Ifa, it is telling them to leave the Orisha. What is actually to how to embrace the Orishas with the understanding of Ifa, which is the words of Olodumare that guide us to worship Orisha. So we have a lot of people querying, is Ifa separate from Orisha? Not necessarily because we have the cult of Ifa, just as we have the cult of Shango, the cult of Ogun, the cult of Egu, the cult of Yami, the cult of Ushu. So they have their cults, but collectively they make the fabric of what we call information.
Okay, well, I'm listening to what you're saying, and then, I have a question concerning what is a cult. Because somehow the term cult normally have a negative connotation. And I want to believe that the practice of Ifa Orisa should probably not be referred to as a cult, just because of the negative connotation. But the reality is that every organized religion or every recognized religion at some point in its history was referred to as a cult.
True. All right, but if we use the definition or the concept of a cult, because the collective body of Babylons in Ifa is considered a cult because it is a selective group that you have to initiate to become part of their body. Same as those of the Shango, you have to initiate to become part of the body. So that cultural group basically is identified as a cult because it have different rules and protocols separate from other groups. So yes,
Okay.
it may have negative connotations, but in terms of it is a realistic view that you could use it until we define a different term is satisfied.
All right. So, in reality, just the connotation is negative, but the word itself is not
It's
necessarily a
not
negative
necessary,
term.
not necessarily. So when we say the Ifa priesthood is a cult, but the essence of Ifa, which is the words of Olodumare that came to guide all humans, all mankind, as to how to become a perfect human, how to come to Omoluabi, how to come to Atona, find the path. If we take away the backgrounds, the words are still mandatory. Even Orisha worshippers should know the words as to properly connect and worship the Orishas. But if they say that Ifa and Orisha are supposed to be separate, yes, the person and the group is to be separate, but they are still a holistic group. Without Ifa, there's no Orisha. That's why I say without Osai, there's no Orisha, because if Osai don't give you the element of herbs to consecrate the Orisha, then there's no Orisha without Osai.
All right. So then, now that leads to other questions.
Yeah.
All right, because first and foremost, my first question is what is IFA? Baba, could I ask you to do a favor?
Yeah.
Just reduce the volume on your speaker.
Yeah. That
Right.
idea?
Yeah, so that way we would avoid any feedback. That way we could speak directly. All right. My first question is what exactly is IFA?
Ifa is the words of the creative being, God, Olodumare, that came to the world as the guiding principles. They came in the form of Odu, which are the incarnated manifestations of the word in a different form. So the 16 major Odu would have come, and then from Oshetuna, which is the 17th Odu, had a combination of the other 239. So actually 256 Odu, which is the guiding principles of everything that exists in context of guided the word of God being manifest. Like that. So I'm going to use a biblical term because a lot of people have been indoctrinated into the biblical concept.
Okay.
So I will put it. No
Okay.
bias.
All right. Because the reason I asked that is because many people are of the opinion that Ifa is probably an Orisha or Ifa is probably a person. So in me asking that question, right, the clarification I'm looking for is so that people would understand whether Ifa was a man or not a man.
Well, we have to put it in context. Ifa is the word which was bought by an Orisha, or we say Yomale, which is Orunmila, which would have been the Orisha that would have brought Ifa into the world. So Orunmila, which is the Orisha wisdom, brought the wisdom of God to the world. He shared it with Akuda, he shared it with Ashira, and they spread it out. Just as how we have Ogun is in the governor of iron, Oshun the governor of water, Oya the governor of air. Orunmila the Orisha, which is the governor of wisdom, which is wisdom of God, but the wisdom of God comes from the scriptural word which we call Ifa.
All right. So now, I mean, yeah, it just introduced a whole lot of
Yeah.
stuff, but I still
Well,
have,
we try to keep it basic, but still we have to go
yeah,
into
because I
the.
want to get at a specific thing,
Uh,
right? Ifa is
Ifa
a
is the word.
system
No,
used to bring the words of Oludumare,
right.
or Ifa is
Uh,
what Mila bought. Which one is it really?
so like it is all yet is said done. It is all. Now, Orime would have brought Ifa to the world. Ifa being the words of Olodumare. Ifa is also the principles, the morals and the ethics. There's also when you put it as the grouping of Ifa, which is the practices of the priests of Ifa. That is where we speak about the cult of Ifa.
Uh,
So they will have the system of divination and interpretation of Ifa. Because even how the basic simple for the simple who may not be in depth into the tradition, the prophet or Mila would have brought the system of Ifa to translate or to bring the word. In his returning back to heaven, he left the system of the 16 Ikin or 16 Pamlaks, in which his children and followers could interpret the messages that he taught them. So when they will ask a question, Odu would manifest or be presented. Now, with the Odu, we will have the chapters or come like just as in the Bible, they'll have each chapter of the Bible, and each chapter will have verses. So each Odu would be like a chapter within the scripture of Ifa, which we call Ifa purpose, or the Ifa sacred oracles. So each Odu would be like have scriptural messages. So out of the 256, each will have the verses and different messages, his poems and stories and historical activities within.
okay.
I know that brings up clarity.
It brings a clarity, but yet at the same time,
Uh,
it introduces more questions. All right. So we are saying Ifa has different aspects.
yes,
Saying there is the divination, and then there is a system by which the Babalaos and his priests follow.
that is the divinationary practice.
Right. And then
No,
there's the philosophy.
but Ifa in itself has 8 essences. I don't want to show off because I can remember all right now. But the essence of the sacrificial and religious, the educational essence, the scientific essence, the medicinal essence, the political essence, and there's others. Right now, we find us all
Okay.
about.
All right.
But 8 essences that covers Ifa. So if you want to deal in medicine, you want to deal in social issues, you want to deal in economics, you want to deal in any aspect of life, Ifa has its essence within those aspects.
Okay. So then that leads to another question because from my research and from my discussion with other people, I've discovered, and this is something that I would hope that you would really address thoroughly and you could probably explain a few things. From my research, I've discovered that Ifa is universal. So I would like you to probably elaborate a little bit on that so that people would understand that Ifa could be found in most systems and most philosophies of the world.
All right. We'll take that in the most simplest statement that would come out of all most of the oracles or stories pertaining to Ifa. Ifa left heaven and was sent to the world. So when the world makes up of everybody, all nations, all humans. So when they say all over leave heaven to come to the earth, they go to Ola Maria and ask for the Akuleya, whatever to show. They go and ask for the destiny. They may say, this is what I would like to do while I reach on you. And Ola Maria said, with that, I will give you a blessing. So you come to the earth. Be a Chinese, Indian, African, Syrian, whatever. Once you have a head, your Ori, and according to the principles of Ifa, that Ori would have left Oru to come to Ai. Ai is not only Nigeria. Ai is not only Benin. They came to the world. So if there's a message for the people of the world, that the world can become a good place. When Ogun came to the world, he came with sticks. And he said, nah, this ain't okay. So he went back up. When Obatala came, he came with water. He said, yes, I could try, but still ain't working. When Norina came, he went to the nation. He used, he said, walk with this plant. And walk with it. So when he came with water and he still what Ogun would have left and what Obatala would have left, he cooperated with the plant. And then it started the system of planting, farming, watering, cooking came into the world. That way everybody in the world cooks. Everybody sleeps. Everybody wakes up. Everybody born. Everybody dies.
Okay,
So
so all right. So in my question, then the next thing I would ask you. So if I go to China, I could find Ifa.
you're fine either.
If I go to Saudi Arabia, I could find Ifa. If
Now let's start with it. We use the term Ifa because the term it is our cultural expression of the same being as everybody.
okay, so
For
you're
uh,
saying the essence of Ifa
mm,
could be found in different parts of the world, but just that the linguistic
the
and cultural
linguistics and cultural
expression
expression
is different.
is different.
All right.
So when you see a Chinese with his little incense and he stick it on the little thing with a plaque on a little altar, he's venerating his ancestors.
So are you saying that that is part of Ifa's philosophy to venerate ancestors?
Of course. They say what is true? What is the sheshe? The sheshe is all of them are the sheshe. One's father is the sheshe, one's mother is sheshe. One the traditionalist is the sheshe. So the tradition which we carry on is the principles of the principles of our tradition.
All right. So then, now that you say that Ifa is Isheshe, now I'm going to ask a very, very pertinent question, and a question that is asked by many persons who are part and who are not part of the tradition. And that question is, what is the difference between Ifa and Orisha? Or is there a difference?
If you wanted terms of the remember I talk about the cultural practices, there may be a difference. But in a sense, there really no difference because how can say there's a difference and not a difference? As a practitioner of Ifa, there's protocols to the practice of Ifa. But in the same Ifa, I say Mojba Lolo Mario or Lulu of Queen, Mojba Borisha, Mojba Bogbe Egg Bonte Malaysia Lolo Mario, Mojba Baba Tobi, Yara Tobi, Baba Lorisha, Yara Lorisha, Mojba Baba Yi. So all are recognized in Ifa. Because if I do a divination, if they say you need to go to Shango and do a bow to Shango, or you need to feed the ego, but you need So Ifa in the culture sense is messengers of Olodumare. They are prophets of Oromila. They are followers of Oromila that bring the prophecy. Orisha worship, they are more like a more religious aspect to a particular deity.
All right. Let
But
me let me let me let me just interrupt you.
yeah,
Now, before you go into practitioners, right, in differentiating what the life differences are in terms of how they live. Before you do that, I want you to tell me what is an Orisha. Because you
yeah,
explain what is Ifa.
yeah.
So, in all fairness, before
Oh,
you go into explaining the differences and the nuances, please explain what
well,
is an Orisha so
no,
people can understand. Because some people let's say it's God and that
yeah.
might be wrong.
No, however, this tradition is so complex that from every answer there's a question. But Orishas are elemental spirits. That is spirit of the elements. They come like they are messengers. So when they say Oya, the spirit of the wind, the element of air. They say Oshun, the spirit of the waters, fresh water, element of water. You have Ogun Onire, element of wood, Orisha. Shango, element of fire. So they are basic elemental energy forces that can manifest or incarnate into human beings. Or they are through a collection of Egun, which I would say is like an ancestral spirit that are connected to strong with the energies of the elements, would incarnate and manifest and become part of the existence life form.
All
So
right.
there were people who lived the world, lived on earth that were elevated and became Orisha, as well as they have the elemental spirits. So when you talk to the water, it's water, but the characteristic of human nature would be Oshu, right? So
Okay.
they are not gods, but they are messengers of Olodumare, and they are a servant or assistants to human for our growth and development while on earth to find the good condition, as they describe.
All right. So to put it real simple and in a nutshell, are you saying that Orishas are simply elevated ancestors or people who lived as human beings?
Well, that's it. It's two aspects of they are elevated energies. Yes, right. They are elevated and individuals who can elevate a mind to Orisha. But you also have the elemental spirits, which is the Orisha that came from a room that came on the earth in this creation. Then you have also the Orishas in the aspect of Irumalan. Irumalan now would be the force, elemental force in the heavenly realm, as we would call it. So Oshun being the primordial mother within the heavens, her incarnation on earth would be as the fresh river. And then you will have the person incarnate. Just as how we just talk about Jesus being God that walked the earth. It's the same concept, right?
All
It's the
right.
same concept.
All right. So now tell us the difference in the lifestyles and the philosophical differences between the Ifa and the Ifa and Orisha.
Well, one of the things we just have to be mindful of in when we try to differentiate lifestyle, cultures, and practices. We have to remember in Trinidad, we have a historical record that will show in terms of our lifestyle of practices may vary because of a number of influences. Colonialism, slavery, just in terms of social impact, some people want to fit in. So you'll have a cultural change according to the tradition. Then you'll have the traditional way, which will come from the homeland. So a lot of time when we say Isheshe, we might be recognizing the traditional way that came from the source, which would be Ile or Nigeria, Benin, Candomblé, wherever our roots were like. That's why we used to have Sakara or Saraka in the early days where people would have expressed their ancestral, their traditionally while in this colonial environment. So when you say lifestyle, the lifestyle basically is the same. Ifa, in a sense, is much a more disciplined in terms of we put more emphasis in learning of the messages, learning of the Udus, learning of the sacred texts. The Orisa culture, in terms of the worshiping of Orisa, play drums, sing, play chants, and the manifestation you look for to bring some form of message or some form of healing, some form of blessings. Alright?
Okay, well, I think your answer was quite comprehensive, and I think you more or less cover a lot of the grounds. But I wanna ask now. So when you're dealing with Ifa, basically you mentioned the system, you mentioned the philosophy as two separate things. You mentioned in the beginning Ifa being the word of Olodumare. All right. Now, most religions have some form of scripture. Um, Hindus have the Bhagavad Gita, the Muslims have the Quran, the Christians have the Bible, and almost every religion have some sort of book. Could you give us some sort of an insight into what literary corpus or what books is used by people who practice either Ifa or Orisha religion or tradition or spirituality?
Well, as I said earlier, Ifa is the scriptures. In early days, being it was an oral tradition. So the opportunity to sit at the feet of the elders was the opportunity to go and hear the stories and hear the oration. But now, in terms as we develop and evolve, and as I would say, connection, you know, electronic media and all these faster experiences in life, you can get the same message in books now. So, although it may be different writers, Ifa Oracle is written a number of books. You have the Sacred Ifa Oracle by Nimak and I think Ipiga. You have Ifa Dida by Sulagbade Popola, Volume 1 and 2. Then you have the 16 Major Odu. So it have a number of books basically right now.
Oh, so you have various
Various writers and
translations or
various
versions,
translations.
just like how you have Bible and Quran.
But what I tell always tell persons, if you want to get traditional information as the Ifa, Ifa tradition, and then identify Orisha by Orisa, because a lot of we has not learned the alphabet. So when people go Orisa and they get information from the South Americas, Cuba, the Candomblé. So the messages might vary according to their translation. It comes as we have the sounds from the scripture. We express the sound in our life. So when we were Christians, I grew up in Baptist and churches. So the experience, the psalm was used to apply to our life and principles and morals. Now that we have the scriptures of Ifa, is how do we put these principles and morals together. That's why I say the young child cannot read the cookie jar on the shelf, but the elder can read the cookie jar on the shelf. When the elder's hand cannot go into the jar, the child hand can go into the jar. And he took out two cookies and they shared two cookies. So he's saying that sometimes the young and the old have to work together. That is from Odu. But in terms of how we apply these into our life, and this is where, as I say, learn the stories, but not just the story to learn the story, but understand the principles. The young palm shoots in the heaven, not taking notice of the older palm that goes behind. It is just what young palm trees. You see young shoots, and then you see the older branches, and you see the dry branches and the fall. It is expression of life.
Okay. So then now, you see, the more you expound and the more you explain, the wide variety of information you're covering, I'm picking up on little things, right? I would like to understand everything, but I mean, I know that is virtually impossible for
Right.
one
Well,
program.
there's another phrase I say, how do you eat the head of a rat? They say bit by bit.
Okay. All
So
right.
bit by bit. So you just get bits by bits. So when the conversation, you just allow people to have a general idea of little aspects of the tradition.
All
So
right.
it's not just about beating drum, kettle, press it up, whole hour united the next 3 hours in the morning, and then come back. Because most people, their experiences in Orisha is just their experiences within a PCR.
Okay. So,
Is not,
hmm,
not in terms of hearing of the verses, the Odu of Shango, Obara Meji, Oguna Meji, and how Ogun came into being through the Odu Oguna Meji. So it gives a wider perspective, a wider view within followers that they embrace Ifa. Ifa not necessarily initiate into the cult or the grouping of Ifa, but connect with the words so you could worship your Orisha in a more understandable, more clear way, and more get that respect as everybody get a respect. So when they say Shango, you could speak of Shango, and not just the story about Shango and Ogunas fight because they fighting over Oshun and this one take Oya and that. So, but you have a more solid thing, so you could tell about the principle. Why did Shango kill himself? Why they say Shango kill himself? Because he have degraded himself by his ego overtaking him because he get a low position. And so, when things get to a head, you may go out of way and create something that you will regret after.
all right,
And
Baba. I mean, I understand what you're saying, right? But some people might interpret it as you're pelting stones. But we know that is not what you're doing, right?
exactly.
All right. But the question is that I have now. Now, you've used the term repeatedly throughout the discussion so far, and I've heard you use this word Udu, and I'm trying to figure out in my mind what is an Udu.
I time because the most basic principles. All right. The words that came out of Olodumare mouth is what we refer to as Odu. Now, in the system of Ifa, Odu is like a binary code or symbols that are mapped, or we call it letters, which would have 16 letters. Some in other conversation, we may do other things so we show people the visual as to the Odus. But Odu come as, when you say one speaks of singularity. One can speak in terms of unity. So one can be defined in many different spheres. So if I just use the first Odu,
Excuse me.
which is Ogbe, Ogbe represents light. And then we could take that light and give many stories as to light entering into one's life, light coming into one that we move from our ignorance. So we could take it to the Odu is the letters of the words that made up the word or the whole scriptures of the Bible. So I remember I said earlier there were 16 major Odus, and it had a 17 Odu, which was a combination of Osher and Otura, which we call Osher Tura, which was written to Oshu. And then that combination gave the population of all the Odus that you have now 240 or the 259 to the 256. So going into Odu will be a very complex, that will be a whole discussion in itself.
Well,
But
I know, but
Odu
I
is just
mean,
a interpretive, just as how we write the letters in the alphabet and make words from the alphabet. Odu comes similar as the alphabets. It is the alphabet. These are the combinations.
all
But
right.
the, each Odu will incorporate, so it come like Okbe or Yiku. So it come like AB. Then you have Ogbe, Iwori, then AC. So you can go down the road and see all the combinations and the,
Okay. In the beginning of your definition, you mentioned binary system. So my question is, are you telling me that the system of Ifa is an advanced mathematical system of computation? Because computers are based on the binary system of using the zero and the
but,
one.
I would like to try to make it basic for the listeners rather than into my just flaunting my understanding. Now, every scientific invention or practice is a shadow or a copy of our nature being, our being, right? The motor vehicle operates just as a human body. The same principle. You must put food. The food becomes the fuel. The fuel gives energy for the motor to operate. And then we have the exhaust, which we call our excretions or exhaust.
Okay.
Right? Our breathing system is system similar to what you do in air conditioning. So most of the science that we see today basically came from the human nature. Now, there's a book where we call Africa Civilized the World, or some say Egypt Civilized the World. Many of the simple basic practices that we would have done traditionally would have been the catalyst for some of the modern technologies. Right? So if you go to IFA, in IFA you see all the science, physics, mathematics, chemistry, biology, wherever you look, you're seeing it in IFA, but in understanding it in the scientific effort, in the scientific motive. So if it's all right, you have an ailment, and if I says use this soap, and that soap, and you take it and you make you make your soup, and you take it. Now, if you go into the medicinal components of those plants that were used, well, wait now, this is what they used to make Panadol. This is what they would have used to make all these pain relievers.
Okay.
Right? So, if I is scientific, the mathematics, even if you go to just people that say 16 modules, come from the 16 coming to 256. And if you look at the mathematical structure, you're seeing something happening in that mathematics. If you look at that thing, so it's not to go into the whole essence, but IFA is science.
Okay, so then I mean that is taking a whole lot away
It's
because
a lot.
most people attribute Orisha practice to superstition. But
Well,
now I am here having this discussion with you, and you are showing me that the system on which Ifa is based is binary, is a
yeah, it's
scientific,
science. It
a
is science.
mathematic system that is used by modern science because all our computers actually
Well,
work on the binary system.
everything operates by numbers. We know why most people would take our the tradition as a superstitious is because they only see the cultural. It's only today that they're having conversation outside of the little cove. They go into the chapel and they sit down with the elder and the elder will teach you the little science and the herbs and the mixtures and the connection with the when we can sit here and do a divination to tell somebody a story, something that is happening in another part of the world. The same as if we were to use on the internet. That's all.
So therefore,
Use the simple system.
all right. So well, you may say it's simple to you, but I don't understand. I could come and I could sit with you and you perform an adafa. I have never seen you in my life, but yet you sitting down on the next end of a mat and you telling me every single detail
Well,
of
that
what is going on in my life. How is that
well,
possible?
that is where we go back to Ifa. There's a traditional saying, Ifa lolo ni, Ifa lolola, Ifa lo tula pelue, which means Ifa rose today, Ifa rose tomorrow, Ifa rose the day after tomorrow. So in terms of when we connect with Ifa, remember I said Ifa is the words of God, but it's not a dead word of God. So sometimes when we say some scriptures were inspired by men that died, and it was their experience alone, Ifa is the experience that is continuous. So whatever divination system you use, Ikem, Opele, Obi, it will reveal a Odu, and that Odu now will tell the story. So it says most Odu will start with the name of a priest, the name of priest that gives evidence that a priest did a divination. Then it will speak of a client. I mean, a client did come to the priest with a situation that is similar to yours.
All right, but
So the
then
remedy now would be a remedy that will work for you just as it worked. So there's an evidence that it worked.
okay. So all right, now my next big question is why would anyone want to have a divination done?
Well, divination is a way to, all right, who in the tradition will understand that there's things that is happening in their life that they do not know what is causing it. So Ifa goes to the root of a problem. You need to know if you're going to do an investment, you want to know if it will be successful. So you ask Ifa. Because I just tell people every year, I just tell people, why those Calypsonians don't go to Ifa Prince or Orisa Peace in time if this song is going to be. So they spend invest money into a song and your partner, yeah, that song good for you. Go bring it to the yard and when they make it know it, they will you go back to. But you go to your uncles and it will give you direction as to whatever is situation in your life it will be. Every human should do a divination, especially your children from birth, that you know the life part of the child.
All right. Now I want to ask a question because I had a conversation with the founder of the Ifa School of Enlightenment,
Mm.
right? And they are establishing a preschool. And one of the things that she told me that they consider at that school is the special needs of each child. She mentioned that in this tradition, which is Ifa Orisa, that after the child is born, that they do a particular initiation ritual. I don't know if you want to tell us a little bit about that because what she explained is when the children enter into the school, there are things that would be peculiar to the needs of that child, meaning the child may not be allowed to eat a particular thing or the child may not be allowed to do a particular thing. So they can tailor make a program for each child. So could you tell us a little bit
All right.
about that
What
process?
what you'll be speaking about is Eshen Eshe being your feet, and Tayi touching the earth. So this I say every within the birth of a child, 3 days to 9 days or 3 to 7 days, your child you should go to a priest to know what is the destiny of the child. So it leaves the parent not guessing as to the destiny of the child. Also, they will know what might be negative for the development of the child. So we call it maybe some person you would like to use the word taboo, but these things may not be helpful for the child. So you may find that certain things have the child keep crying. What is this? It may be the color of the clothes, maybe the food that you give the child. So the SNTI gives you a roadmap for the child and also the protective guidance for the child to have a well grown up life. Also the what is the outcome of the child's future. So a parent who would take a child into the traditional school will on enter. It come like a safeguarding teacher, so the teacher will know what we should pay attention within this child in terms of our program. Now it will be harsh in a sense for the teacher because now if you have to take the special needs of a child, you find you'll be overburdened. So they can take in context that when you look at the number of children coming to school, the number of things that should not be allowed, that thing, what is necessary, what not necessary, they eliminate it from the structure and they can have a smooth running of all the children and they won't have no negative effects. Because if you do not know what affects your child, you may be trying to treat your child for something because you think that is the problem, but you don't know the root of the problem.
Okay, well this sounds to me like a very scientific approach to growing your children. So now let's go back a little bit because you mentioned Ifa knows yesterday, today, and tomorrow. And what we're discussing is carving out a map for a child so that this child's best interest could be protected and the child could be nurtured into being who the child is supposed to be. So are you telling me this is the true purpose of divination?
Yes. Even not just the child, every human being. Even before somebody should get married, they could do the elimination. Is this marriage going to work? I'm want to have a relation. Is our relationship, there's compatibility within our relationship? If not, if I don't tell you no, it don't have. But it could also tell you, This is what is necessary that you should do to have a balance and a good relation. So you're not just to say, oh, if yes, I love this man, and if I don't tell me this man is not compatible to me. So it's not to say it will make it throw away years of a relationship, but what is would be necessary to bring about the best out of that relationship outside the difference in compatibilities. So if I goes to the source, and the source in terms of problems and situation always will bring the right answer that are necessary. Even politicians who wouldn't be in wisdom, they should seek the advice of the priest. No king can rule a kingdom unless he is advised properly by the priest, the divine one.
All right. Well, I think I've asked you quite a few questions, and I mean, just to recap, we discussed who and what is Ifa. We discussed what is Orisha. We also discussed the last topic that we were now discussing is the role of divination. All right. So I don't know if you're going to allow me to ask you any more questions for this episode, or if I'm allowed to squeeze in one more question.
Well, if you could squeeze in one more, and I'll give up.
All right. One of the concerns that most people seem to have about the tradition is the changing of names. All right, because we still live in a society that is heavily ruled by very old colonial um, landmarks. That is the best term I can use. Um, what is the significance of an individual changing one's name?
Well, funny talks. If we look at now, as I said, first we're looking at names. If I were to send it to the port of Spain, where would you go?
Port of Spain.
They were where going? I sent it to the port of Spain, but you still say going port of Spain. They have to go Spain
All right,
to land at the port, and then they can say, yes, I'm in the port of Spain.
okay,
So sometimes a person having a name, and the name has no correlation. The name has no benefit to the person. The name has no representation of the character of the person. Then you're just wearing a label. In terms of changing name in tradition, the name expresses you, expresses the person, expresses the character. My traditional name is Iwalewa, and it became my character. So people find that they always connect. How you connect? Because maybe my character is what attracts you to me. So your name represent and identify the nature of the person. This is the soul or the spirit being that resides in this body. Remember, Western concept, we give a name to this physical being, not the person, not the soul, not the spirit. So you walk around as a representation of the outward, but in spirituality, we say this is just a vessel, this is just a vehicle, and the driver is inside. But who's the driver? So through the tradition, we'll get to understand who's the driver inside and how to make sure that this driver will reach the destination, which is becoming a perfect human being.
all right. Well, I think
So
more or
I break
less.
it down simple. I don't want to go too much into names and meaning and names because with any discussion we'll go into that. Right? So it is just to say as we moving forward in our tradition, let us get the scriptural understanding of our worship. That when you meet other people in the religion, you don't have to defend the tradition, neither your religion, neither deity, but to give also share the wisdom that they may see the Orishas in them, just as we can see the Orishas within ourselves. We say Aboru, Aboye, Aboshishe.
Aboro, aboye, aboshishe.